Biohacking for optimal performance. Pretty cool title, huh? Like that? Yeah. So before I go into exactly what biohacking is, we have to talk about one of the most specialized cellular structures that we have. And this is actually a picture right here. It's called the mitochondria. And these things are powerful. What they found out is that your health is basically completely dependent upon the health and function of your mitochondria. And your mitochondria are basically your cellular battery chargers of the body, your power generators. So it's exactly how your body makes energy out of the food we eat. And so every single function of our body is primarily dependent on the health and function of our mitochondria. And basically what it does is it takes out these, the fat and the sugars we eat. It takes these electrons from those foods and it transfers them to oxygen in a process called oxidative phosphorylation. It's a long one there. And what happens is during that transfer of electrons, we're producing something called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, and that's basically our energy currency of our cell. And so if you read any single textbook out there, any medical textbook, and you look up mitochondria or you look up ATP, you're going to see it's the powerhouse of the cell. And that's exactly what it is. And so what they found out is that basically when our mitochondria starts deteriorating, that's basically the primary cause of almost every single chronic disease out there, especially cancer, because cancer is not a genetic disease, it's a metabolic disease. And a lot of the genetic mutations that occur are actually a downstream effect from the original metabolic issues going on. So it's a metabolic disease all stemming from basically our function of our mitochondria. And here's the problem. Half the people under the age of 40 have already something called early onset mitochondrial dysfunction. It's basically where your mitochondria get way weaker before they're supposed to. And I put my iPhone there as an example. So we all know that once you get that new iPhone, the battery is awesome. You're like, oh my gosh, this is great. You charge it overnight and it lasts all day. And that might go for what, 4 to 6 months or something? You know, awesome battery. It's the biggest thing you notice right when you get a new phone. But then you realize something. About 4 to 6 months later, you realize, okay, midday I actually have to kind of give it a second charge for it to go the whole day. And then, 2, 3, 4 months later goes by and pretty soon you're like, the thing is freaking constantly on the charger now. I mean, it literally always has to be charged. And that's kind of what our mitochondria are doing now, because no one knows how to basically biohack our system into creating the most efficient and best mitochondria as possible. And so really what we want is we want to produce the most mitochondria as possible to have the best energy currency for our body to function the best. And so this is where biohacking comes in. And there's many different definitions, but it's basically, I listed a few here, but it's the art of hacking your biology using nature's built-in mechanisms to stack the deck in your favor and become the best version of you. My simple definition is basically maximizing our biological potential. So systems in our body, how can we maximize those to get the most use out of them? And Dave Osprey, the founder of Bulletproof, he gave 2 other definitions. I like the bottom one, the art and science of becoming superhuman. That pretty much applies here, but also to use systems of thinking, science, biology, and self-experimentation to take control of and upgrade your body, your mind, and your life. And so that's what biohacking is. And so if we're going to talk about biohacking for optimal performance, and we know that mitochondria are the energy producers of our cell, the powerhouses of our cell, our battery generators, basically what we have to do is we got to biohack our mitochondria. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because once you biohack your mitochondria, you're going to be more effective at everything, more efficient at creating energy. You're going to basically have the best energy production as possible. You're going to leak fewer electrons, and that's the process again of how we make ATP, our energy. You're going to live longer, healthier, and basically biohacking our mitochondria, we have one goal in mind, and that's something called mitochondria biogenesis. And that's the formation of brand new mitochondria and getting rid of all the old damaged ones. So it's kind of renewing our body. And so the hacks we can actually do, and what I'm actually going to be talking about, are these right here. heat therapy, heat stress, and that includes all infrared exposure like sunlight, like saunas, etc. Cold thermogenesis, like ice baths, cold showers, cryotherapy. You may have heard of the Wim Hof method. Wim Hof is also known as the Iceman. He holds the record for being submerged under ice cold water for the longest period of time. And he actually teaches something called the Wim Hof method, where he teaches you basically how to hack your system. And it's all about all the benefits you really get from this cold water submersion is from the effects it has on your mitochondria in the first place. High intensity exercise, cyclical ketosis, and cyclical mTOR activation. I've talked about these in the past because I'm really passionate about like exercise and just kind of biohacking our system, but these are kind of fairly new topics. So as more and more information comes along, I got to do more and more talks on it to share exactly what I've learned, because a lot of this stuff is kind of groundbreaking in the last few years. And then finally, vibration training. And so when I was doing research on each and every one of these, there was just way too much information on just, hot therapy alone. So basically, today we're going to be focusing on this one and this one only. And we're actually going to make this a part, 2 or 3 series for future talks. But today we're really going to be talking about heat and infrared exposure. And so the biohacking premise is basically all stems down to a concept called hormesis. And hormesis means that you're exposing your body into short bursts of healthy amounts of stress. And then it also has to detail the physiological benefits we get from those short bursts of stress. Because we're always taught that stress is bad, and stress is absolutely not bad. Chronic stress is bad, and chronic stress will create the stress response, but short-term stress, short terms of healthy bouts of stress, for example, like exercise, is absolutely necessary. So you actually need to expose yourself to these stressors to get the most out of your body. And so and if you only get one thing today, only one thing out of this talk, I want you to know the enzyme that these healthy amounts of stress activate. And the enzyme, the good news is that it's a very simple enzyme to memorize, basically. And it's peroxisome, proliferator, activated, receptor gamma, coactivator 1 alpha. All right, everyone together now. No, but seriously, so PGC1 alpha. And why this is so important is because this is the enzyme that's activated from these short bursts of stress that actually cause you to make way more mitochondria. That's the enzyme that causes mitochondrial biogenesis. And that's exactly what we want to do to increase our health, function, and performance. And so it also, too, that's one enzyme it does, but it also activates these other healthy, stressful pathways in our body. So we have a problem of being uncomfortable in today's society. We want to do everything to avoid any type of stress, exercise, walking, anything. We don't want to do any of that. But what happens if we avoid all those healthy stressors? What we're doing is we're not activating these healthy pathways. We're not activating these healthy enzymes to become the best version of us. And so we're losing our mitochondrial efficiency. We already talked about that. That basically leads you to chronic disease, and we become unhealthy, and we lose our number one asset, and that's our health. And so when you're talking about heat thermogenesis, infrared exposure, we got to talk about sunlight, and we got to talk about sauna use. And I've harped on sunlight all the time, and we're going to talk about that, but we're going to just make this a couple minutes because we all know that sunlight has benefits, and it's way more than just vitamin D. You're talking about massive nitric oxide production. When the sun hits your skin, you produce more nitric oxide, which actually opens up and relaxes your blood vessels. And so you have way better blood flow, eases tension on the heart because you're causing all of them to dilate. And so that alone basically cuts heart disease risk in half, just that alone. And you're talking beta endorphin production. And some studies show even a 44% increase in endorphin production. And that's like basically your mood boosting effects in your brain, feeling good. That's what endorphins are. And again, we already talked about vitamin D, and it actually can prevent up to 16 different cancers just by getting optimal vitamin D from the sunlight. And then what we're going to be talking about specifically is how it charges and optimizes your mitochondria. Because here's what happens. Your sun is infrared light. You got near, mid, and far infrared spectrum light. And what happens is that these penetrate your tissues and actually add more electrons into our energy pathways. When we're taking electrons from our sugar, from our fat that we consume and add it to oxygen to make ATP, sunlight basically facilitates this entire process. And when you drink water, like I am right now, this water is not structured. And so as I drink, and then I expose myself to the sun actually charges my water inside of me, inside my cells. It causes structured water, if you will. You might have heard that term. And what happens is that when you structure the water inside your cells from sunlight, you're basically kind of pre-charging your water in your cells with energy. So as you go through these energy pathways, it adds way more electrons to the chain, produces more energy as a result. And so it also enhances other enzymes there, but you're basically just charging your body. You're charging your batteries when you're out in the sun. And what I would recommend is when you go out there, take off your shirt or take off, excess clothing, take off your sunglasses, especially if you have any type of eye issues, because our eyes need that UV light, unfiltered UV light. Lenses and sunglasses filter everything, so you don't want that. All the beneficial light spectrums we need to charge our mitochondria. And it also too, it can literally correct nearsightedness. A big premise, especially in the eyesight book up there, is something called the Bates method. And one of the main exercises there is called sunning, basically being out in the sun, the real sun, without sunglasses. So you talk to Dr. Mercola, all these major players in this game here, they're all saying take off the sunglasses. They don't wear sunglasses at all. Now when the sun gets down too low, then it's suitable. But when you're out there getting sunlight, take off the sunglasses so you're getting those healthy spectrums of light to promote brain functioning. And again, these modern LED blue lights, these very well may be those, but those are actually not good for you. And especially at nighttime when you're trying to go to sleep, because it actually tricks your body into thinking that it's daylight. And so if our body thinks it's daylight, we stop releasing these natural hormones that are good for sleep function, like melatonin, because this artificial blue light tricks your brain to thinking that it's daylight. And so using things like, you can use like red filtered light that basically filters out all of these blue spectrums of light, especially at night. Some people do that. I haven't even gotten into that yet, so that's kind of that might be my next hobby on this like photobiology stuff. But that's sunlight. But also too, saunas are huge, and one of the biggest experts is Rhonda Patrick. She's a PhD and a biochemist who's done tons of research on sauna use, and especially when it comes to terms with your mitochondrial health. And this is, we think of saunas, usually Finland has basically the highest concentration of saunas out there. They're called the poor man's pharmacy in Finland. And in fact, I read a stat, they're as common in households in Finland as TV sets. Wow. So these things are like a staple, and you're seeing these major health benefits and studies coming out from Finland. And in the US alone, you're seeing all these public infrared saunas basically becoming super popular, all of these different businesses, because the research is starting to uphold all the benefits that's going on. And so the more the research is done, the more you're seeing these things. And I actually did a little Facebook Live YouTube video at my personal private infrared sauna studio. And so I've adopted this, I've seen massive benefits, and that's what we're going to talk about today, what I've actually experienced. And so we got to talk about 5 things when we're talking about saunas and what they do. The first one is the increase in something called heat shock proteins. The second one, we're going to talk about how it benefits exercise performance, and then we got brain function, heart health, and also how it detoxifies our body. The first one we're going to talk about is heat shock proteins, and it's a really easy one to memorize, right? Heat stress increases the amount of heat shock proteins in your body. And when you're looking at what this does, it's crazy. It prevents plaque formation in your body, in your brain, in your arteries. And so when you're talking about things like Alzheimer's, dementia, which is basically a buildup of amyloid plaques in your brain, saunas basically eliminate that by increasing the amount of heat shock proteins in the body, which eliminate the plaquing. And also too, you're talking about when you have a heat shock protein, because it's not just in your brain, it's increasing in your skeletal muscle, these heat shock proteins, they basically cause more protein synthesis in your skeletal muscle. So guys, or even gals, if you're trying to increase your lean muscle mass, doing a sauna post-workout actually will increase your heat shock proteins, which will increase the protein synthesis in your muscle. So great for muscle building, but even just for lean muscle mass and just having healthy lean body composition. This is huge. And they even did a study on animals. It increased protein synthesis by 30%. And it was directly dependent on the amount of heat shock proteins that were produced. And so the second one we're going to talk about is exercise performance. And now obviously, If we can make more healthy skeletal muscle, we're going to be benefiting our exercise performance. But besides that, you have way more because, again, heat is a stressor, a healthy stressor, especially in short bouts. And you've probably heard of free radicals. When you're exercising, when you're under stress, we produce free radicals. And we usually have a bad kind of assumption that free radicals are just like awful for our health. And they are awful for your health in large amounts. But in small amounts, in normal amounts, it's absolutely crucial because it acts as an important signaling molecule to basically increase more mitochondria. And so that's why these stressors are so important. Heat is a stressor that increases something called ROS, reactive oxygen species, which is just a fancy name for free radicals, that in turn will actually stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, the production of brand new mitochondria for our body so we can create more and more energy for our system. And then here, just one study in just exercise endurance, 32% increase from doing a sauna twice a week for 3 weeks. And that's it. 30% increase in endurance. And they basically measured this by the time someone exercised till failure. So they literally did studies before and after, and a 30% increase is mind-blowing. And so here, I like what Rhonda Patrick said. She said, in other words, hyperthermic conditioning or heat therapy through sauna use doesn't just make you better at dealing with heat, it makes you better, period, because of the effect on your mitochondria. It makes you better in really every aspect of your life. And so the mechanism of why this helps so much is, first of all, you're increasing your plasma volume and your blood flow to your heart. And when you increase blood flow to your heart doesn't have to work as hard, so it just basically is kind of smooth sailing going around. And then it also, that stressful, that natural stress it has on your heart, then for future exercise, it keeps your heart rate at a lower level. Because exercise is kind of like sauna use. You're actually going to see about 150 beats per minute spike in your heart rate, just like moderate intensity exercise. So it has a lot of those benefits. And another one is the increased blood flow to your muscles, which is also called perfusion. So when you increase blood flow to your muscles, not only are you increasing nutrients like glucose, like oxygen to your muscles, but you're also assisting in the removal of lactic acid and other wastes. So blood flow is huge for the muscle. And when we store blood sugar, we store it as glycogen in our muscle, and that's for energy stores. So when you're working out and you realize you can't do another bicep curl, it's because your glycogen stores are maxed out. They've completely ran out. But here, what this is telling you is that it reduces muscle glycogen use by 50%. So it doesn't reduce glycogen, it reduces the use of glycogen. So if we can reduce the glycogen because we're having so much more blood flow of nutrients, of oxygen, of glucose to our muscle, we're less dependent, less reliant on this glycogen store, so we can go a lot and a lot longer. And that's why it increases endurance. And then also too, it improves your sweat rate. And why that's so important is because it keeps your core temperature super low, especially in high bouts of exercise, so we're able to go longer and longer and longer, all from sauna use. That's simple. And so another mechanism that it does is it increases your growth hormone. About 2-fold is what the studies show, but they also have done trials where they're actually seeing a 5-fold increase in growth hormone from using a sauna use, especially after strength training. And so when you're doing that and you look at the mechanisms, the increase in plasma volume, the blood flow to your heart and muscles, that creates an endurance mechanism. But then when you add in the heat shock proteins and the amount of increasing protein synthesis as well as growth hormone 2 to 5-fold, you're talking massive increase in muscle mass, lean body mass. So we're really basically hitting every single area of exercise performance you can just by using the sauna again. And what's cool is that after a training session, after an exercise, you go through this thing called exercise-induced inflammation. It's where our inflammatory responses in our body are at its maximum the hour after working out. And so what you want to do is when you're doing that, that's when you want to actually utilize the sauna, because you're going to facilitate that exercise-induced inflammation, which is responsible for making more proteins, more mitochondria. You're actually facilitating that process. It's something you absolutely want to do. And so the worst thing you could do is actually do like an ice bath during that first hour after strength training, because it's called exercise-induced inflammation. Well, ice baths are an anti-inflammatory. So doing an ice bath with actually what a lot of athletes do, a lot of bodybuilders do even, completely negates a lot of their effects. So they're actually forcing their body to work a lot harder in the gym because what they're doing after the gym is detrimental to their health and their physique. So doing sauna use right after is beneficial. Now, after that hour period of exercise-induced inflammation, yeah, absolutely you can do a cold bath right after a sauna session, but not during that first hour because it's completely counterintuitive. And then we're going to talk about brain functioning, and I'm just fascinated by any ways you can naturally increase your mental focus. And so what you're going to do is when you're in a sauna, you'll notice that afterwards, if you ever really done it, you kind of feel like this lightness, like this euphoric feeling, like a big weight has been lifted off your shoulder. And that's kind of true because I do sweat like a gallon, so kind of a weight's coming off my shoulder, but you literally feel this euphoric feeling, and that's from the endorphins and the dynorphin production. And all of us have heard of the word endorphins. We just talked about that's what sunlight does, but also too dynorphins. And dynorphins are almost the opposite. They basically upregulate receptors for endorphins. So they basically sensitize your body to endorphins, making even just a more mood boosting effect. And so when you're doing an intense workout or you're going for a long run, you've heard of something called the runner's high that people get. And it's that euphoric feeling once you kind of hit a certain time and intensity of exercise. Well, that's all directly related to this endorphin and dynorphin production. So that's how people get that runner's high is what they call it. And two, ROS, the reactive oxygen species that heat stressor causes, actually increases massive amounts of growth factors in the brain. And we've talked about BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and it actually increases that into a pretty high amount, and that's what actually in turn activates stem cells in your brain and your neural tissue. So it actually helps you activate way more cells in the brain just by the reactive oxygen species, the free radicals that are produced from that heat stressor. It increases norepinephrine, another stress hormone that aids in basically memory, focus, and also prolactin, which again is going to promote the growth of something called myelin, which is that fatty sheath around your brain cells. And so it basically makes your brain signals to conduct electricity a lot faster. So I can get that message from my brain to the rest of my body way, way quicker because your myelin sheath, that fatty connective tissue or that conductive tissue outside of the nerve is basically maximized at its full potential. And so when you're increasing these growth factors, when you're increasing brain production and reducing plaque, the studies show you're going to get a 66% lower risk of dementia and a 65% lower risk of Alzheimer's. And people don't know what the heck to do with Alzheimer's. Well, I can tell you right now, sauna use is a huge benefit for them. Huge benefit. And so, aging. As we age, you start to lose mitochondria. You start to lose brain cells. That was brain function. Now we got to look at heart health. And a groundbreaking study in 2015, and it's called the association between sauna bathing and fatal cardiovascular and all-cause mortality events. And this is in the journal JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association. And so they looked at sauna use and basically cardiovascular events and all-cause mortality. And so what they found, in conclusion, they found that an increased frequency of sauna bathing is associated with the reduced risk of, you're talking sudden cardiac death, fatal coronary heart disease, fatal cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality. So from sauna bathing, you're significantly reducing any type of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality from any cause. This is huge. And you can't find there's not really many biohacks like this available that can give you this much results, especially with the amounts of skeletal mass, brain functioning, everything. And so this wasn't even like a small study. It wasn't an observational study. This was done over on 2,000 men, 2,300 men to be exact, and it was done over a period of 20 years. So they looked at these guys, they showed, and what was cool is that all these benefits were dose responsive, meaning that the more you actually use the sauna, the higher and higher the benefits were. And just to show you a couple of the stats, doing it 2 to 3 times a week, you showed a 27% lower death rate from heart disease and a 24% lower all-cause mortality. If you bump that frequency up to 4 to 7 times per week, you're talking 50% lower death rate from heart disease and a 40% lower all-cause mortality. So the potential for a 40% lower risk of all-cause mortality, I mean, that's amazing right there in itself. And we know why. It's because the effects on our mitochondria. And so what's also cool, and I find this cool, because a lot of times studies, they fail to mention certain big factors, but even when there was factors like people smoking, people with already types of chronic diseases, already with high triglyceride amounts in their blood, it didn't matter what they had, what conditions, anything, what their lifestyle factors were, they still showed the same results, that sauna, bathing, increased health and performance, period. And so that's really cool. And so the benefits, again, are from that heat stressor. And they're actually using here a traditional hot, dry, finish sauna that averaged around 174 degrees, usually around 15 to 20 minutes. And the heart health, again, they even compared the benefits, I already talked about that, from sauna bathing to just exercise, period. And we all know how good exercise is for us. And I quote, "Functional improvements associated with sauna bathing correspond to similar benefits seen with regular physical exercise, such as improvement in blood pressure and left ventricular function." And that's part of your heart. So we already know that sauna helps the heart, all of that, like we talked about. And finally, and this is actually the reason why I personally wanted to even get in, I was interested in infrared saunas in the first place, is the detoxification benefit that you get. And basically, sweat is a huge thing. Sweat is our primary mechanism that we actually get rid of toxic overload in our body. And they even did analyses of our urine, of other fluids, and our sweat by far had the highest concentration of heavy metals. So we already know that that's a huge way for our body to excrete toxins out of our body. And so people who aren't sweating on a regular basis, that can be a problem. And you can be very toxic inside your body if you're not getting that sweating mechanism done. And so, again, it's an important route of detoxification, and you excrete, it's been shown to excrete toxic heavy metals like arsenic, lead, mercury. We have a problem with all three of those in our water supply and our dental amalgams, all sorts of things. This is a huge issue. The fish we eat. And so this is a great way for detoxing, and the sauna will basically restore your skin's ability to basically excrete those toxins. Because if you never sweat, it's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you'll lose it. So if we're not used to sweating on a regular basis, we lose that ability to excrete toxins out of our system. And so Dr. Mercola even said that the infrared sauna is literally the best thing he can think of, and he does this, quite honestly, daily to get rid of these toxic overloads. And even the healthiest people out there, they still have toxic overload. It's impossible to avoid toxins in today's society. Absolutely impossible. And so in regards to pain, or things with like fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, any type of inflammatory arthritis, it's been shown to reduce pain 33 to 77%. And the best part about this is that even 6 months after this study was over, after they even stopped doing the sauna, those actual numbers actually remained very consistent in their pain reduction. So the sauna does have profound effects from the heat shock proteins, from the mitochondria, from all of those mechanisms we already talked about. And so the three types of saunas that are out there, you got the ones in Finland, which are usually the traditional dry finish sauna. And they basically heat you like an oven. So they heat you from the outside in, and so and usually they get to about 175 degrees. So they get very, very hot, and it's like an oven. And then you have kind of the wet finish sauna, and that's the thing that you pour water on the rocks to generate steam, and that's why they call it a wet sauna. The infrared saunas really fascinate me, because this is actually, with the infrared light and the infrared beams, it actually penetrates deep in your tissues, and it heats you from the inside out versus the outside in, like the other types of saunas. And so that's why, too, that you can have a way lower temperature inside an infrared sauna, and you're talking 140 degrees, for example, versus 180 degrees. You can have a way less temperature, but at the same time your body's sweating just as much, if not more, and you're actually doing a lot more physiological benefits in the body. And so the infrared saunas fascinate me. I personally go to a place called Perspire, which is a private sauna studio. They're all single base. You get to watch your Netflix, everything inside the sauna with UV light therapy, so it's amazing. I would check it out if you guys haven't done so. And again, your body temperature naturally rises without changing the air temperature outside. So the infrared is really, really cool. And so when you're doing this, again, this is a safe practice. You gotta listen to your body though, because the stress is really important. You kind of want to feel that uncomfortable feeling, if you will, because that's where our body's getting all the benefits. Just kind of like exercise. If you work out, and then right when you feel that little moment of discomfort, you just stop, you're not gonna quite get the results you want. I mean, if you've seen people running races and stuff, you know, right before they cross the finish line, they're kind of in pain, you know, they're not just smiling like, yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, they're going through a stressful period. And so you also want to make sure you're hydrated before, during, and after. My favorite thing after, because you're sweating so much, is actually bone broth afterwards, because that restores healthy electrolytes, sodium, potassium, everything right after my sauna session. So I'm restoring all the electrolytes that I'm actually losing out of my sweat. And I like the fifth one, the buddy system. You know, go with the buddy if you have one. But I mean, the place I go to, it's only single room saunas, but it's generally, if you've never done it before, going with a friend will actually help, just in case you get woozy or something. But honestly, you want that uncomfortable feeling, but it's not a torture chamber at the same time. So you kind of know your limits there, and don't try to push yourself too much. And again, the premise of that is the heat stress, because that's exactly what you want. And that heat stress generates those free radicals that boosts mitochondrial biogenesis. And so a couple concerns and, you know, side effects, if you will, is if you're a male and you're trying to have a baby, being exposed to this temperature, especially when you're sitting down, and especially in the scrotum area, casing your testicles, if you're trying to have a baby, you can actually kill off sperm cells by being in a sauna. But the catch is that it's completely reversible. And it takes about 5 weeks or so post-sauna use to regenerate all those sperm cells again. So if you're trying to have a baby, you may want to avoid the sauna temporarily. Females, likewise, if you're pregnant or you want to basically avoid the sauna, just to be safe and avoid any type of fetal abnormality. And again, if you get a headache, you make sure you put a cold rag over your head. Avoid alcohol. Almost every adverse reaction to a sauna has been involved with alcohol. And so alcohol, we already know, is a diuretic. It's going to excrete more fluids. And then if you're in a sauna, on top of that, sweating in massive amounts, it could be problematic. And basically, sauna use is not only safe, but it's highly beneficial for almost everybody, except if you're trying to have a baby. Okay, so let's summarize all that stuff we just learned, because wow, that's a lot of stuff. Bottom line is that we're exposed to a healthy stressor. Tonight we talked about heat. Well, the heat then develops something called reactive oxygen species, our free radicals, and our heat shock proteins. And what those do is they stimulate massive growth factors in the brain, like your growth hormone, like your BDNF, your brain-derived neurotrophic factor that activates stem cells in the brain. Also, too, it's going to increase protein synthesis. Remember, 40% increase in protein synthesis from sauna use. It's going to increase the amount of sweating, so we're going to be detoxifying ourselves of lots of heavy metals, especially mercury, lead, arsenic. We're increasing BDNF, just said that. You're also assisting the body in plaque removal, so we're going to be preventing 65 and 66% decrease in Alzheimer's, in dementia. We're also going to be increasing blood flow, so you're going to be able to have better exercise performance, more endurance, everything. And it's all from the same premise, mitochondrial biogenesis, the ability to make new, fresh mitochondria in our body so we can optimize energy efficiently. And that in turn will affect everything. And then here is a list of my references. My best suggestion going forward is seriously try it. It's so great. I personally, my personal regimen is once a week. I usually do it on a Sunday. Just from the toxins we accumulate throughout the week, I do a 40-minute sauna session about 157 degrees. And I mean, it's great. And so I like it. The research backs it up. So the only thing left over is for you guys to give it a try. Thank you. Appreciate it. Questions? Anybody?
Do you get most of the same benefits if you use the regular sauna,
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the, since infrared saunas are kind of a newer thing, a lot of actually the studies are done on the old, the drier saunas. Really the biggest thing though is that heat stress. So you still want to get that uncomfortable feeling, and you will get that as well in the infrared. So it just heats it up a little bit differently. The biggest thing is outside in versus inside out. Yep, because those infrared beams goes right through you and penetrates the tissues, whereas the other ones are like an oven, and so you're just kind of in this hot room. Yeah.
So If a session is 15 to 20 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
if you go like you're going 40 minutes,
Yeah.
does that mean you can only say that's worth 2 times?
No, that 15 to 20 minutes was actually done on that study I was presenting, and that was with the dry sauna. Because again, the dry saunas are at a lot higher temperature, so you cannot go 40 minutes in a dry sauna. The 40 minutes is in an infrared sauna because it's not as hot, so you're able to actually withstand more. By the same time, you're actually detoxifying more.
So how
So,
what would you recommend?
So 15 to 20 minutes for a dry sauna starting out with. You can start with like 30 to 40 minutes, but again, you can easily do 40 minutes the first time, just lower the temperature a little bit. And almost all the infrared sauna studios, they have a temperature gauge and they have a time gauge. So you can alter, so if I lower the temperature, you can easily do 40 minutes. So I do 157 degrees. You can go in and do 140 and you could probably easily get to 40. Yeah. Yep. But dry saunas, for sure, you can't go that long. It actually will tell you, like, okay,
And
get out.
does the same thing apply as to 2 to 3 times a week or 4 to 7 times a week?
Well,
those percentages?
Because again, yeah, that's the thing, because that study wasn't done on an infrared sauna. So if you're talking only 15 to 20 minutes of a dry sauna, doing multiple courses of that, like 4 to 7 times a week, is easy. But infrared saunas, you go longer, and I think the benefits are actually better. So I think you can actually do that less frequency and get similar results as that. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah.
Is there like an infrared index? Is there like a way to measure infrared, or is it all pretty much the same?
No, they're not all the same. When you're looking at a sauna studio, I think trying to get all the spectrums is important. Some are just far spectrum infrared, some are just near spectrum. The one I personally go to has all the spectrums, so it's kind of similar to sunlight in that respect. So I would look for as many spectrums as possible so you're getting all the benefits from each spectrum of light.
And talking about sunlight, is there like different days, like I'm just relating to like the UV index, how it's like the different days it like fluctuates. Is it different days the infrared, I guess, measurement fluctuates? Like is it always far and mid and
Yeah, the sunlight has all of them. In general though, you want to be out at like solar noon to get all those benefits, because that's where the sun's basically right above you. Anytime the sun starts to go down, or when your shadow is longer than the height of your body, then generally we're getting more of those negative UVA rays instead of the positive UVB rays. And so in general, you kind of want to be out there at solar noon, and from my understanding, you are getting all of those wavelengths of infrared when you're out like that. But that too, I mean, it's just like blue light exposure is not necessarily bad in the daytime, but all that's negative at night. So the daytime, you want all the sun you can get. Nighttime, you don't want any of that artificial light. Anything else? Yeah.
So if you're sitting out in the sun, it's kind of hard to have your eyes open. If you close your eyes,
right, but
you
could have literally a hat on and still get the same benefits, because you're still absorbing the UV light. You don't have to have a direct beam, but when you have a UV protector on, you're actually filtering out specific wavelengths of light that are actually very, very helpful for your brain. So you could go out there with a hat, anything, just don't keep an artificial lens over your eyes. And so windows basically do that same thing. So you don't want to be, so getting that sunlight through a window pretty much negates the benefits as well. Just basically don't have a protective thing, a protective barrier covering your eyes.
And then you can close your eyes and still get the benefit.
Yeah, closing your eyes, but I mean, it's just simple as like walking outside in the daylight. You don't have to look right at the sun to get those benefits. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm not saying go out there and just open your eyes and just stare at the sun like that. Like no, that like I wouldn't do that. Not recommended. Yeah. Anything else? All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.